November 14th, 1965. 2:30 p.m. Ia Drang Valley, South Vietnam. Sergeant Ernie Savage is 26 years old and he's about to die. He knows this with absolute certainty. Everyone around him knows it too. They're surrounded, cut off. 125 yards from friendly lines might as well be 125 miles. The radio operator is dead, sprawled across his set. Lieutenant Herrick is dead, shot through the chest and back while trying to pull his men out of the ambush. Sergeant Palm is dead. 8 men dead in the first 20 minutes, 13 more wounded, some badly. 29 men in this platoon when they walked into the killing zone. Now they're huddled in a rough circle in elephant grass so tall you can't see beyond a dining room table. The North Vietnamese are everywhere, shooting the wounded, hunting stragglers, closing in. Savage hears them, sing-song voices, getting closer, excited chatter. Then short bursts of automatic fire, screams, sometimes laughter. They're laughing. The enemy soldiers are standing up 10 yards away, pointing at targets, laughing while they execute wounded Americans. Savage looks at the radio. The dead operator's blood is still wet on the handset. He picks it up. His hand is steady. This surprises him. He keys the mic and calls in artillery, on his own position, 20 yards out. Danger close doesn't begin to describe it. That's right where we want them, he tells the fire direction center. The first shells arrive seconds later. The ground lifts. Savage and his men are thrown into the air, covered with dirt and branches. The noise is annihilating. The concussion sucks the air from their lungs. Out in the grass, North Vietnamese soldiers are screaming. Savage keys the mic again, adjusts the fire, brings it closer. The laughing has stopped. 3 weeks earlier in Hanoi, men in a different kind of uniform are making a calculation. Senior General Chu Huy Man commands the B3 Front, North Vietnamese forces in the Central Highlands. He's a professional soldier, methodical, strategic. He thinks in terms of will and mathematics and political outcomes. Man and his staff are studying the Americans. These new soldiers arriving with their helicopters and their firepower are different from the French. Better equipped, better trained, more mobile. The technology is impressive, but man sees a weakness. The French broke at Dien Bien Phu, 57 days of siege, 3,000 French casualties, and France quit. Not because they lacked the military capacity to continue. France was a nuclear power, for God's sake, but because the political will collapsed. The mothers and fathers of France decided the cost was too high. The equation was simple. Casualties equal political pressure equal withdrawal. Man believes the same equation will work on Americans. He studied American history, Korea, the political backlash when casualties mounted, the negotiations, the stalemate that felt like defeat. General Von Nguyen Giap, the architect of Dien Bien Phu, puts it simply, if the cost in casualties is high enough, the Americans will defeat themselves. Not in Vietnam, in Washington, in living rooms, in newspapers, in the arithmetic of body counts and gold star mothers and political calculation. So man makes his plan. November 1965, the Ia Drang Valley. 3 North Vietnamese regiments, over 6,000 men, will engage the Americans in sustained combat. Close quarters fighting, hand to hand. The kind of combat that negates American advantages in artillery and air power. Make it bloody. Make it personal. Make it hurt. Kill enough Americans and the political will breaks. The equation is simple, mathematical, certain. Man positions his forces around the Chu Pong Massif. He waits for the Americans to come. What he doesn't know, what he can't know, is that equations don't account for everything. Some men don't break because breaking isn't in them. Nobody asked them if they wanted to quit. Nobody told them the option existed. They're sergeants and privates and lieutenants, 20-year-olds from small towns. They don't think about political will or strategic calculations or casualty ratios. They think about the man next to them, about not letting him down. about going home with their heads up. General Mann is about to learn that courage can't be calculated. November 14th, 1965 morning. Landing zone X-ray. The name is arbitrary. Just a spot on the map. A clearing in the scrub brush at the base of the Chupong Mountain, roughly the size of a football field. Dry, dusty, scattered anthills and small trees. Lieutenant Colonel Hal Moore's 1st Battalion, 7th Cavalry is going in. 450 men, 16 Huey helicopters at a time. 8 to 10 minutes to land, unload, and get out before the next wave. The intelligence suggests enemy forces are in the area. What it doesn't say is that 2,000 North Vietnamese soldiers are dug in on the mountain watching the helicopters approach. 11:48 a.m. First lift touches down. Lieutenant Al Devney's platoon, Bravo Company, jumps off. They move into the tree line. Within minutes, they're in contact. Light at first, a few shots probing. Then the mountain erupts, human wave attacks. Not the phrase, the actual thing. North Vietnamese soldiers pouring down the slopes in groups of 20, 30, 50, screaming, firing AK-47s from the hip. Closing distance. The Americans shoot them down. They keep coming. By 12:15 p.m., Moore's battalion is surrounded completely, 360 degrees every direction, and the enemy is still coming. Captain Bob Edwards' Charlie Company is holding the southern perimeter. His radio man is shot dead beside him. Edwards takes a round through the left arm, then another through his right side, just below the ribs. He keeps commanding, refuses evacuation. His company is spread thin. 120 yards of perimeter with depleted platoons. If he leaves, the line might collapse. Lieutenant Henry Herrick, 2nd Platoon, Bravo Company, is pursuing a group of enemy soldiers northwest of the perimeter when he hits the ambush. It's not an ambush in the tactical sense. It's an entire North Vietnamese battalion. Herrick's platoon, 29 men, walks into a killing zone. Fire from 3 directions, instantaneous, overwhelming. The lieutenant is hit immediately, chest and back. He goes down but keeps giving orders, organizing his men, trying to pull back toward the perimeter. He dies doing this, still talking on the radio, still fighting. Sergeant Palm takes command. He's killed within minutes. The radio operator, Sergeant Stokes, is shot and falls dead across his radio set. Now there's no one in charge. 29 men, 8 already dead, 13 wounded. They're in elephant grass, can't see more than a few feet. The North Vietnamese are everywhere. Specialist Galen Bungum tries to dig in. If you tried to raise up to dig, you were dead. There was death and destruction all around. The choice is simple. Fight where you are or die running. They choose fighting. Private First Class Russell Hicks, Private Jeffrey, Specialist Jackson, Sergeant Reuben Thompson, all wounded, all still fighting. Specialist Clarence Jackson takes a round clean through his left hand. He shifts his rifle to his right hand, keeps firing, gets shot a second time, keeps firing. Doc Charlie Lewis, the medic, is 21 years old. He's crawling from man to man with his medical pack, bandaging, injecting morphine, stopping bleeding. He's shot twice, once in the leg, once in the side. He doesn't stop, can't stop. 13 wounded men need him. To treat them, he has to sit up or stand. Every time he does, the North Vietnamese fire at him. He treats them anyway. When he's done, he picks up a .45 pistol and an M16 and helps defend his patients. This is the Lost Platoon. 125 yards from safety, cut off, surrounded. This is where Sergeant Ernie Savage picks up the radio. Savage is a 3-stripe buck sergeant, junior NCO. He wasn't supposed to be in command. That was Sergeant First Class McHenry's job. But McHenry is 30 yards away in the western part of the perimeter, completely cut off by enemy fire and terrain. Savage ended up with the radio by accident, by proximity, by being the man closest to it when Stokes died. Now he's responsible for keeping 29 men alive. He's 26 years old. He's from a small town. He's never commanded anything more than a squad. The tactical situation is hopeless. The North Vietnamese are closing in from 3 sides. His men are dying. The artillery forward observer, Lieutenant Bill Riddle, is back at the main perimeter. He's on the radio. Ready to fire. Savage starts calling in coordinates. The first volley lands 40 yards out. Good, effective. NVA soldiers are hit. Savage hears them screaming. He adjusts fire, brings it closer. 30 yards, 25, 20. The shells are landing so close that the Lost Platoon is lifted off the ground by the concussions. Dirt and branches rain down on them. The noise is beyond description. The overpressure makes their ears bleed. Galen Bungam watches 3 North Vietnamese soldiers running toward their position. The artillery catches them mid-stride. They disappear. Every time Savage hears movement in the brush, he calls fire. Adjust. Fire again. All afternoon, all evening, all night. The North Vietnamese try everything. They probe, they assault, they try to sneak close in the darkness. Savage brings artillery down on them. At one point, a group of NVA soldiers gets within 10 yards. They stand up. They're laughing, pointing, mocking the trapped Americans. Savage calls fire. The laughing stops. The enemy tries again, and again, and again. For 26 hours, Ernie Savage coordinates artillery fire. Over 100 separate fire missions, danger close. Every single one, he refuses to break. His men refuse to break. Back on the main perimeter, other men are making the same choice. Lieutenant Don Cornett, 2nd Platoon Leader, Charlie Company, is 24 years old. Shot through the boot, all his toes blown off, bullet wound in his back, right of the spine. He's in agony, bleeding badly. He can barely move. PFC Jack Smith is bandaging him when Cornett says he's going to do something to get the troops organized. Smith watches the lieutenant crawl away into the high grass, toward the sound of firing, toward the enemy. Cornett dies out there, somewhere in the elephant grass, in hand-to-hand fighting, still trying to organize his men, still leading. His death keeps others fighting. They saw their lieutenant torn apart, refusing to quit. How can they do less? PFC James Shadden, Delta Company Mortars, has been shot twice. Once in the leg, once in the arm. The arm wound is devastating, bone shattered, blood everywhere. He can't fight, can barely move. He hears them coming, the North Vietnamese, moving through the tall grass, shooting wounded Americans, executing them. Shadden hears an English-speaking NVA officer shoot PFC Snyder Bembry. Bembry is screaming for help. The officer shoots him with a full auto burst. Then the officer speaks. "Wait a minute, who are we shooting?" He has an accent. He's checking targets, being methodical about the executions. Shadden knows he's next. He has 1 grenade left. His shattered arm won't let him throw it. So he does something else. He slides the grenade under his armpit, pulls the pin, holds it there with his body weight. If they find him, he'll kill as many as he can. If he passes out, the grenade will fall and detonate. Either way, he's not being executed. He lies there for hours, live grenade under his arm, waiting, bleeding, refusing to surrender. The NVA patrol moves past him somehow. Maybe they think he's already dead. Maybe they don't see him in the grass. Shadden lies there through the night, still holding the grenade, still alive. This is what General Mann didn't calculate. This. Exactly this. The willingness of a 20-year-old soldier to booby-trap his own dying body rather than quit sunset. November 14th, 1965. The Lost Platoon is still holding, somehow. The main perimeter at X-Ray is under attack from 3 directions, north, west, south. The enemy comes in waves, gets cut down, regroups, comes again. At the battalion command post, Lieutenant Charlie Hastings, the Air Force Forward Air Controller, radios a code word. Broken Arrow. It means, American unit in danger of being overrun. All available aircraft respond immediately. Within minutes, every fighter-bomber in South Vietnam is heading toward X-ray. They stack up overhead at 1,000-foot intervals, 7,000 feet to 35,000 feet, waiting their turn to deliver ordnance. F-100 Super Sabres, A-1E Sky Raiders, B-57 Canberra bombers. They drop napalm, high-explosive cluster bombs, 20mm cannon fire. The noise is continuous, annihilating. The ground shakes. Smoke and dust choke the valley. The North Vietnamese keep attacking. This is where they expected the Americans to break. This is the moment. Surrounded, outnumbered 4-1, taking casualties, night falling. This is where the French broke at Dien Bien Phu. This is where the calculation should work. But something is happening on the American perimeter that doesn't fit the equation. Lieutenant Rick Rescorla is walking the line. He's British-born, joined the U.S. Army, became an officer. Now he's a platoon leader in Bravo Company. He's carrying a bugle, an old French Army bugle he found earlier. As he walks the perimeter in the gathering darkness, he sings Gary Owen, the 7th Cavalry's march. Custer's song from the Little Bighorn. The men hear him. They grin despite everything. Some join in. Rescorla stops at each position, checks on the men, tells them they're doing a great job. That support is coming, that things are under control. He never raises his voice. Almost speaks in a whisper. The men believe him. Hal Moore walks the perimeter with Sergeant Major Basil Plumley, checking positions, talking to soldiers. Some of these men have less than 2 weeks left in the Army. Less than 2 weeks from going home, from discharge, from civilian life. They're on the perimeter, fighting. No one suggests they be pulled back. No one asks to be pulled back. Moore talks to them. They say things like, "We'll get 'em, sir." "They won't get through us, sir." Later, Moore will write, "Their fighting spirit had not dimmed, and they made me proud and humble." Out in the darkness, 125 yards away, Ernie Savage is on the radio. Still coordinating fire, still adjusting, still fighting. Lieutenant Bill Riddle, back at the battalion command post, takes turns on the radio with Savage, talking him through it, keeping him connected, letting him know he's not alone. Other soldiers take shifts on the radio too, talking to the Lost Platoon, telling them to hang on. Help is coming. Stay alive. The night is endless. Tracers arc across the darkness. Artillery flashes light up the perimeter. The sounds of battle fade and surge, and fade again. The North Vietnamese try to infiltrate the Lost Platoon's position. Savage calls fire on them. They try again. He calls fire again. This happens all night, dozens of times. The enemy probes. Savage brings down hell. Doc Luz keeps working. 13 wounded men, 2 bullets in his own body. He keeps them all alive, all of them, through the whole night. At one point, he has to stand up to treat a soldier with a sucking chest wound. North Vietnamese soldiers open fire. Luz doesn't flinch, finishes the treatment, moves to the next man. When dawn comes, if dawn comes, these men will still be here. That's the choice they've made, not in words, not in speeches, just in the simple act of staying, of fighting, of refusing to break. General Mann's calculation didn't account for this. Couldn't account for this. November 17th, 1965, 3 days later. The Lost Platoon has been rescued. X-ray has been reinforced. The North Vietnamese have pulled back into Cambodia. The 2nd Battalion, 7th Cavalry, Bob McDade's battalion, is marching toward Landing Zone Albany. It's supposed to be a walk in the sun. An administrative move. They'll march to the clearing, helicopters will extract them, and they'll go home to base camp. The men are relaxed, weapons slung, column formation. Some are thinking about beer and showers, about hot food, about letters from home. 2.5 miles from X-ray. The North Vietnamese 8th Battalion is waiting. 1:15 p.m., the column is strung out, over 500 men in a long line through elephant grass and scrub brush. The ambush erupts from 20 yards away. Not an ambush, an execution. Close-range fire from three sides simultaneously. RPGs, AK-47s, machine guns, grenades. The killing is instant. Officers and NCOs are targeted first. Radio operators, anyone trying to organize a defense. Within 5 minutes, the column disintegrates. No perimeter, no defensive positions. Just isolated groups of men fighting in grass so tall they can't see the man next to them. Alpha Company at the front of the column is hit first. Captain Joel Sugdinis tries to organize his men. Lieutenant Larry Gwynn is shot through the ankle. Keeps commanding. Sees soldiers around him cut down. The confusion is absolute. Americans shooting Americans in the smoke and grass. North Vietnamese mixed in with U.S. troops, hand-to-hand fighting. Bayonets, rifle butts. Grenades at contact distance. This is worse than X-ray. At X-ray, they had time to set up, to establish a perimeter, to organize. Here, there's nothing, just chaos and killing and the smell of blood and cordite. PFC Jack Smith, Charlie Company, is in his first real combat. He's 19 years old. Within 20 minutes, everyone around him is dead or wounded. Everyone. The area he can see, the size of a dining room table, is filled with bodies. A North Vietnamese soldier appears 3 feet in front of him. Machine gunner, setting up to fire. Smith flicks his M16 to full auto, shoots him in the face. Another soldier next to Smith is shot, artery torn, blood spurting. Lieutenant Don Cornett, same Cornett from Charlie Company who died at X-ray 3 days ago? No, different man, same name, different fate, but similar courage. This Cornett is shot, badly wounded, tells Smith he's going to organize the troops, crawls away into the grass, dies fighting. Smith looks around, bodies everywhere, wounded, screaming, the sound of firing from all directions. This is where they should break. This is where the calculation should work. This is Dien Bien Phu. This is the moment of collapse. But it doesn't happen. Small groups form defensive positions. Sergeants who were never supposed to be in command start leading. Privates become fire team leaders. Wounded men fight from where they've fallen. Lieutenant Pat Payne, recon platoon, gathers a handful of men. Sets up a perimeter, holds it. Sergeant First Class Robert Jemison gets his platoon into cover. Begins organizing return fire. All across the killing zone, American soldiers are making individual decisions to fight, to hold, to refuse to break. The North Vietnamese expected panic, retreat, surrender. What they're getting is something else entirely. Camp Holloway, November 17th, 4:01 p.m. Captain Myron Deduric's Bravo Company, 2nd Battalion, 7th Cavalry has survived X-ray. They were extracted yesterday. They're at base camp. Finally, they're showered, fed, wearing clean uniforms. The enlisted men's club is open, beer is flowing, stories are being exchanged. Specialist John Wallenius is celebrating his 22nd birthday. He survived X-ray without a scratch. He's drinking with his platoon, laughing, alive. Deduric walks into the club. Saddle up. Battalion's catching hell. We may have to go in. The laughter stops. Eyes fill with disbelief. Again? We just got out. We just survived. We were promised rest. No one protests. No one refuses. They put down their beers and double time to their equipment. They work quickly, throwing on harnesses, loading magazines, checking weapons. Deduric issues the shortest frag order in Bravo Company history. We'll be landing from the southeast. Open fire at anything on your left. Run to your right. A hot landing zone. One side held by Americans, one side held by North Vietnamese. Land between them. Lieutenant Rick Rescorla, the same Rescorla who walked X-ray's perimeter singing, helps organize the platoons. The men are exhausted, still processing X-ray, still carrying those memories. And now, they're going back. But they go, every single one, 6:45 p.m. The Hueys touch down at Albany, fire immediately, tracers, RPGs, the sound of battle is everywhere. Deduric's men bail out. Some are hit before they reach cover, others sprint right, away from enemy fire, toward friendly positions. They're landing into hell, into a battle that's been raging for 5 hours, into chaos. Lieutenant Pat Payne, hunkered down with his recon platoon, watches them come in. We were all very surprised to see those helicopters. We were only securing one side of the LZ, so when the guys would jump off, we hollered at them which way to come. I had the feeling we had actually been rescued, that the cavalry had arrived, just like in the movies. Rescorla lands, organizes his men, begins walking the perimeter. He finds wounded, shell-shocked soldiers, men who've been fighting for hours without leadership, without support, without hope. He walks among them, never raises his voice, almost whispers, tells them they've done a good job, that there's support now, that things are under control. Payne watches him. I admired the courage it took to land in Albany. Lieutenant Rescorla was one of the best combat leaders I ever saw during 2 tours in Vietnam. The reinforcements make the difference. Not in firepower, though that helps. In spirit. In the simple fact of arrival. Someone came for us. We're not abandoned. We can hold. Lieutenant Larry Gwynn, wounded, helps coordinate bringing in supplies. Every trip to the landing zone is under fire. Men are hit running ammunition forward. They keep running. The night closes in. Artillery rings the position. Danger close. All night. American wounded still scattered in the grass outside the perimeter. Medics volunteer to stay with them, in no man's land, through the darkness. PFC James Shadden is still out there, still alive, still holding a live grenade under his armpit. Thirsty, in agony, refusing to quit. Jack Smith passes out from blood loss, wakes up to a medic checking him, passes out again. Wakes to artillery falling so close it's killing wounded Americans and North Vietnamese mixed together. He survives. Somehow. All night, small groups of Americans hold isolated positions, calling fire, fighting off probes, staying alive through darkness and terror and math that says they should all be dead. Morning comes, they're still there. November 26, 1965. The Ia Drang campaign ends. 34 days of operations, 2 major battles, X-Ray and Albany, dozens of smaller engagements. The American body count, 305 killed in action. The North Vietnamese body count, 3,561 estimated killed. Both sides claim victory. In Saigon, General William Westmoreland and his staff look at the numbers. 12 North Vietnamese dead for every American, a ratio of 12.1. Westmoreland's conclusion. We can win this through attrition. We can bleed them to death. We have the firepower. We have the technology. We have the kill ratio. He asks for more troops, more helicopters, more artillery, a war of attrition, a war of mathematics. The strategy is set. Search and destroy. Find the enemy. Fix them in place. Destroy them with superior firepower. The numbers will do the rest. In Hanoi, Senior General Vo Nguyen Giap and his commanders study the same battle. Lieutenant Colonel Nguyen Huan, the North Vietnamese battlefield commander at Ia Drang, makes his report. His assessment is different. We learned lessons from this battle, Ann says. We thought that the Americans must have a strategy. They had tactics, helicopter tactics. Very good tactics. If we could defeat your tactics, we could defeat your strategy. The North Vietnamese see the battle differently. Yes, they took massive casualties. Yes, the Americans killed them by the hundreds. Yes, the firepower was devastating. But they held the field at times. They bloodied the Americans. They proved they could stand and fight against the most powerful military on earth. And most importantly, they survived. By our yardstick, Ann explains, a draw against such a powerful opponent was the equivalent of a victory. Giap's calculus hasn't changed. The French broke when casualties mounted. The Americans will break too. It's just a matter of time, of patience, of will. The patience and perseverance that wore down the French colonialists will also wear down the Americans, Hanoi concludes. Both sides are looking at the same battle and seeing different wars. Westmoreland sees kill ratios and attrition. Hanoi sees political will and endurance. Both are missing something. General Chu Hui Man made a calculation in November 1965. It was a professional calculation, based on history, based on the French experience, based on the assumption that democracies can't sustain casualties over time, kill enough Americans, erode the political will, win in Washington, not in the jungle. The calculation wasn't entirely wrong. 10 years later, in 1975, North Vietnamese tanks would roll into Saigon. The Americans would be gone. The political will would have collapsed. The calculation would prove correct. But in November 1965, in the Ia Drang Valley, something happened that man didn't account for. He met men who couldn't be calculated. Ernie Savage calling artillery fire on his own position for 26 hours, refusing to break. Doc Charlie Lewis treating 13 wounded men while wounded twice himself, keeping every single one alive. Don Cornette crawling toward the enemy with his body torn apart, still leading. James Shadden lying for hours with a live grenade under his armpit, choosing death over surrender. Myron Deduric's company climbing back onto helicopters after surviving one hell to fly into another, because their battalion needed them. Rick Rescorla walking perimeters under fire, whispering encouragement, making men believe they could survive the unsurvivable. These weren't generals, weren't politicians, weren't the people who made strategy or policy. They were 20-year-olds from small towns. Sergeants with high school diplomas, lieutenants barely old enough to drink. Medics, riflemen, radio operators. They didn't think about kill ratios or attrition strategies or political will. They thought about the man next to them, about doing their job, about not quitting because quitting meant everyone dies. General Mann's calculation was mathematical, logical, based on precedent. What he faced was something else. You can't calculate a man pulling a grenade pin and holding it live for hours rather than be captured. You can't factor in a medic working through 2 bullet wounds to save 13 men. You can't predict a lieutenant crawling to his death while organizing troops. You can't account for soldiers loading onto helicopters to fly into battle they just survived, because other men need help. Courage doesn't fit into equations. The bitter irony is that Hanoi was eventually right. American political will did break. The war became unpopular. The casualties mounted. The protests grew. The calculation worked. But not in 1965, not in the Ia Drang Valley, not with the men who actually did the fighting. Sergeant Ernie Savage walked out of that killing zone after 26 hours. The Lost Platoon extracted. 8 dead, 13 wounded. Every wounded man survived. Savage had coordinated over 100 artillery missions. Danger close, every single one. When he walked out, the North Vietnamese learned something their generals hadn't calculated. They learned that these Americans, these soldiers, didn't break, wouldn't break, couldn't break. The Viet Cong thought America would break. They were right about the country. They were wrong about the men.